Good evening and welcome again to yet another program here on Globespan 24x7. I'm your host, Charles Sugrim, and with me, my co-host, Derrick Arjune. This evening, we have a lot to discuss, so I want you to sit back, relax, and we have some great guests to take us along this evening as we discuss the issues back home in our dear homeland. Our society is truly split in the middle in Guyana today as we speak. This did not happen overnight. The dangerous ethno-domination in the Burnham years were somewhat neutralized under Desmond Hoyt and Cherry Jagan. The death of Cherry Jagan caused the dangerous ethno-domination to raise its ugly head under Jagdeo. Sadly, this pattern continued under Granger. So what do we do? Tonight, we want to discuss some pertinent issues. One is, what was the court appeal to the appeals court all about? What was the ruling of the Court of Appeal? And what do we do next? When will GECOM begins the recount? And what is the effect of that recount? And then we need to talk about the statements coming from one of the Commissioner, Vincent Alexander, about what happens after the recount. And then, by no means the least, the column written by our most honored friend, Dr. David Hinds, yesterday, and there were some explosive statements, and it caused a firestorm in social media. So tonight, hopefully, we'll have some great answers on our program. I want to reassure our audience that nothing happens unless we sit down at the table and discuss it openly. And I want to encourage all of our viewers, for those of you who on social media yesterday, you demonized Dr. Hinds for his writing, but I believe if you look at it within context, we need to sit down and analyze every statement that he made yesterday. And I think at the end of our discussion, hopefully we'll come out at a better nation. We are indeed very divided. But first of all, let me talk about the COVID-19 that is serious around the world. Here in New York, we are very thankful that the peak seems to be over, hopefully. The president was on the news tonight, and he's saying that this might be the most dangerous part. But on the screen, we are seeing what has happened around the world. What is interesting is that of the 978,000 cases around the world that is active, 277 people has been discharged. It means they were cured of the virus, which is amazing. Of course, there is 73,000 dead. That is too much. Here in the United States, we have 19,000 persons were discharged, great news, but we had 10,500 deaths. In New York, the epicenter of the crisis at this point in time, we had almost 5,000 deaths. In Canada, they had only 321, so I think the Canadians are doing a great job because even their numbers are smaller than us. In Trinidad, they have eight deaths, one was discharged, and in Guyana, none of our patients who went into who was actually identified with the virus survived. And this brought us to the point that Quincy Brafitt made on social media. He had to go to the public domain to file a complaint that his brother-in-law, as we know, Jermaine, died of the virus last week. And because his ex-wife was taking care of his brother and she went home and then the kids went home, Quincy is saying that he had all the symptoms of this virus, yet he was turned away from being tested. He was only tested after he made his appeal that the ministry finally called him last Friday night and tested him. Hopefully today we'll get the result. And he should, we pray God that he's negative. His ex-wife is in danger. His ex-mother-in-law is in danger. What he was told, which is really surprising, was that unless you show 90% of the symptoms of the virus, only then you will be tested. What they're telling you in Guyana is that when you're going to die, then we'll test you to make sure that you die of the virus. Very unfortunate, but I hope that can turn around so our country can be spared of this virus. So this evening, ladies and gentlemen, again, we want to welcome you to our program. I want to thank Nohar Singh for giving us this platform, and also to Devin for being our technical specialist. With us tonight is my co-host, my own brother Derrick, here in New York. And Derrick, people are not sure, are you Indian, are you African, are you mixed? Because they say you have this Indian name, but we don't know who you are. So maybe you can tell them tonight exactly who you are. And of course, we have with us the honored guest, Timothy Jonas, who has been no stranger to us, and of course, Dr. Hinds. So gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for having us.
I'm not going to accept your invitation to tell you about my genetic background. We'll leave it as is, okay?
Okay, all right. So what we want to start tonight, and I'm sure all of our viewers who are watching, they are very much interested in what was the Court of Appeal was all about. What went to the Court of Appeal? And secondly, what was the ruling of that court? When I listened yesterday to the president of the court, and I know Mr. Jonas raised a pertinent point in that proceeding, we are not sure exactly what the ruling is. I know the Chronicle published something, the Morale Wave published something, Kiter News published, and Starbuck News, but we're still not so sure. So maybe, Mr. Jonas, being our team leader in Guyana, can you help us along this path?
It's a difficult question, Charles, to answer simply. And as you know, in this kind of forum, I try hard to avoid legalese and gobbledygook because people want a simple answer. You're right, the judgment which was delivered was not delivered with clarity and was unhelpful that way. We've been splitting hairs, and I'm afraid there's no way to describe it other than by starting at the beginning. If you have a statutory body, any statutory body, and I'll use central housing because it's the one that's been abused by both sides for so long. A statutory body is given power. So central housing has power to allocate housing. And the court always has what they call a supervisory jurisdiction. It has the power to look to see how the statutory body is exercising its power. And if it is acting in a way that is unreasonable, or if it is doing something that it doesn't have the power to do, the court has the power to say stop. So if under PNC, we saw that only one kind of people were getting housing, the court would have been able to say stop if it could be shown to be unfair. If under PPP we see another set of people only getting housing, or people who are not entitled, already rich, getting mega housing, the court would be entitled to inquire to say stop. This is unfair. You're exercising your power wrongly. Now, when you take that to GECOM, the same principle applies. If it can be shown that GECOM is acting unlawfully in its exercise of its power, which is elections, there is a residual power that the court has, supervisory power, to say, stop, you're doing this thing wrong, you're acting unlawfully. The thing is that where Parliament creates a body, sometimes Parliament doesn't want the court to look at that body. So Parliament will pass a law that says in the operation of GECOM, those operations shall not be inquired into by any court. Now, this leads to a territory competition because the courts don't like to hear that, and understandably so. As we know, statutory bodies and government officials are always subject to abuse, always exercise their powers based on irrational and unfair considerations. So the courts don't like that. They don't like Parliament to tell them keep out. And the courts have construed that to say, if you make a decision, it's not a decision at all. So if central housing takes away your property, a power that it has no power to do at all, then the court can inquire. So it retains its supervisory power that way. What happened with GECOM is there are three aspects that Parliament has introduced. Parliament has said, Section 40 of the Representation of the People's Act, it shall not be inquired into. In Section 140, subsection 2, Parliament has gone further and said that the deliberations of GECOM, the minutes of GECOM, their internal communications, whatever they do, is actually not admissible in court as evidence. So it's really difficult for a court to decide that GECOM acted unreasonably or acted wrongly if it can't even look at what happened in GECOM in the conversations among the members. And then third, Parliament said that if you think GECOM is acting unlawfully, the court can look at it through an election petition. Those three arms, those three aspects of a parliamentary ouster gave rise to the question before Justice Holder, do you have jurisdiction to look at this thing? Ms. Moore, Yulita Moore is saying GECOM is acting unlawfully. Justice Holder, do you have jurisdiction to look at it? He said he had jurisdiction, relying on a line of authority that says if the decision of the statutory authority is so illegal that it's not even a decision at all, he can look at it. He wasn't allowed to go further, and an appeal was made to the full court. The full court said, you have no jurisdiction. If you look at this trilogy of legislation, cannot inquire, no evidence admissible, and there's another way to challenge it by the petition, your jurisdiction's gone. So they overruled Justice Holder and did not allow him to continue. As you can see, we're splitting hairs, because if you have jurisdiction theoretically, but you can't receive evidence, there's another procedure, and you can't inquire, whether you have jurisdiction or not, you can't exercise the jurisdiction. Parliament has said you can't hear the evidence. So this splitting of the hair went to the Court of Appeal. And in the Court of Appeal, in a meandering and unfortunately delivered decision, the court said, yes, there is jurisdiction, but because it's so narrow and restricted, given the three arms of legislation that have restricted how you can exercise that jurisdiction, it's not even worth sending it back, because there's no way you can practically exercise this jurisdiction. And therefore, they said, yes, theoretically you have jurisdiction, Justice Holder has jurisdiction, but they're not going to change what the full court said in terms of treating Yulita Moore's application as dismissed because she could file an elections petition if she doesn't like what is done, and in terms of removing the interlocutory orders and saying to GECOM, the power is yours, go and exercise your power. I hope that made it clear. The decision was unfortunately obscure, but that's the end result.
Before you go on, Derrick, if you don't mind, does this then, Tim, open the door for other court matters to be filed now that the court has jurisdiction according to the Court of Appeal, the president of the court? This open the floodgate now for other appeals?
We got a history of litigation, Charles. For the last 18 months, we've been seeing litigation deciding 33 is not half of 65, and deciding that overseas voters can't vote, and deciding that James Patterson was unlawfully appointed. We've got litigation going all the way to the CCJ on frivolity. There's nothing to stop anybody appealing this one. But at the end of the day, I would be very surprised if an appeal was made to the CCJ, if the CCJ said, yes, Justice Holder should continue to hear Yulita Moore's case. I do not think that she was entitled to any of the orders she was seeking, any of the meaningful orders. So yes, anybody can appeal is a right, but it would be a long shot.
Derrick, you want to say something?
I just wanted to say something, and if I understand Mr. Jonas correctly, he says, the court has jurisdiction, but it can't do much even though jurisdiction is recognized. I'm sure Mr. Jonas is aware that even though you have jurisdiction, you have the concepts of limited and general jurisdiction. So you can hear a case, but what you can do with it is limited or properly defined by the empowering by the empowering statute for that jurisdiction. So holder got jurisdiction by the statute to hear the case, but what he can do is limited by the statute that gives him that jurisdiction, and that's not unusual. So we shouldn't consider that as splitting hairs. This happens all the time. And even if we go to the CCJ, there is a statute that brought into place the CCJ. But that statute specifically says that the CCJ can only hear certain cases, not every case that originates in the territories that subscribe to its jurisdiction. So I just wanted to make that. I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. I know, Dr. Hinds, you and I are not attorneys. Both Tim and Derrick are attorneys. But can you give your views on what happened?
No, I'm more interested in the political outcome of what happened yesterday. As far as the recount is concerned, and I think in that instance the court was quite clear. You know, it says you can go ahead with the recount. It didn't stop the recount. I think Electoral was trying to stop the recount, and the court didn't give her stopping the recount. And then the court said that CARICOM cannot supervise the recount. So my reading of what happened yesterday is that the ball has been kicked back 2 to 3 weeks, where it started in the first place when they began to talk about a recount. That is, the discretion for the recount is left in the hands of GECOM. That's what I got from all of that stuff yesterday.
And gentlemen, yesterday I had a discussion with a gentleman on social media, and it is actually a very brilliant son of Guyana, and he was saying that that what the judge says is correct in that GECOM cannot delegate its responsibility to someone else. But I brought up the point to say, well, that happens every day. You have a principal-agent relationship. The principal is still responsible. I'm an auditor. Audit firms do it all the time. They have audit around the world. They ask other firms to do part of the audit for them, but then they're ultimately responsible. So my question to you, Tim, is this different from the Constitution, where GECOM cannot ask another body outside of GECOM to come and supervise something? Is that the judge is saying it's illegal? Is that how you read it to be in the Constitution?
Okay, I like the expression you used. Supervise is a word that is capable of several definitions. It blurs into ambiguity, shades of gray. And the expression you used is much better. And in fact, although the word supervise does appear, what the court did land on is you cannot delegate your discretionary power. No, you're quite right. And a principal can delegate to his agent the power to make decisions. That agent can't delegate it to someone else.
That's correct.
Good. So you are treating GECOM as the principal, but GECOM is not the principal. GECOM has been delegated power by Parliament.
Yeah.
So GECOM is the agent of the state. And that is why GECOM cannot subdelegate. And that is correct. GECOM cannot delegate its discretionary power to a third party. But that's very different from making a decision as to how to conduct elections and whether someone will observe. And there's so many different ways that you can create machinery to undertake the recount without ever delegating your discretionary power. The discretionary power is quite clear.
You're shaking your head there, Dr. Hinds. You want to comment?
No, I agree completely with Tim, and I think that is lost in the conversation because a lot of people are treating GECOM as a law unto itself, whereas GECOM was created by Parliament. And I guess the question comes into play when there is no Parliament. What happens there? But anyhow, we haven't gotten there yet. I hope we don't get there because that will stretch things out much further. But we'll see.
Derrick, you have a question that you want to ask our panelists?
No. I like his analysis of and Dr. Hinds' analysis of the role of GECOM. It's not like a principal. It's not like an auditing firm. And even if you don't want to put them on the same plane because of their designation, you have to look at who is giving that power. This is a parliament of a country, and that power concerns counting the votes of a country to elect the people who will represent that country. That is an extremely important, it's a sacred responsibility. So we have to be mindful of drawing parallels, analogies between principal auditing firm, accounting firm, and what GECOM does.
So, gentlemen, before we move on to the topic of GECOM counting, just to get it clear for our audience who is watching, the court has has not prevented GECOM from doing a recount, if that's the right way to put it. But having said that, they're saying you cannot delegate that supervision to anybody outside of GECOM.
No, you've introduced the word supervision again. They can hire people, they can fire people, they can appoint people to do specific tasks. You don't delegate your discretionary power. Somebody's got to count. You got to hire somebody to count. Somebody's got to hold up the signs. You got to hire somebody to do that. The GECOM has power to hire, to fire, to instruct, to direct. Those are the powers that they shouldn't delegate. But somebody's got to do the job. And they have the power to appoint people, to hire people to do the job. They have the power to direct them, to instruct them. And it is in the terms of directing and instructing that they shouldn't delegate. So they can say to anybody, they could say to the 4 people sitting in this forum, we would like to hire you to come and observe, or we would like to hire you to participate in this function, as long as the function is an administrative function that does not exercise discretion.
So we can go ahead now and prepare for the recount. So let's get into that now. Mr. Vincent Alexander, who is a commissioner for the coalition, he made some serious statements the other day. One of which is that even after the count is over, that does not mean that we have to use the result of that count to make a decision. Is that what I read in him, or is it something else? Maybe Derrick, you can start there.
Well, that's what he said, and I believe you have to look at that in a broad sense. I believe what Mr. Alexander is looking to do is to set up rules that all the parties can agree upon with regard to winner. Remember, the constitutional makeup is clear. GECOM does accounting, receives the declaration, and then based on a meeting and accepting that the report of the chief elections officer, and then based on those regularities, the president is sworn in. That is in the constitutional framework. Now we are having a different framework for the determination of the president. So I believe what Mr. Alexander was doing, and it ought not to be minimized, is that we have gone to a different route as an alternative to the Constitution. First of all, do we have the authority to do so? Secondly, how do we do so? And thirdly, would it be accepted not only by those who have made that agreement, but by our population, which has become accustomed, both legally and politically, to have a GECOM say who the winner is? So that's the way I would like to see it, and I believe it's his position needs to be examined carefully, and we need to be very thoughtful as we go forward with regard to the recount and the result that flows from that recount.
But David, before you come in here, what's the purpose of the recount if not to know exactly who is the winner of the election? Why do we recount? I mean, if the four of us is in a committee and we had a vote, but four is thing. One person got 3, one person got 2. You said, okay, I'm contesting it, the one who got it 2. You do a recount. What's the purpose of that recount? Is to find out who the legitimate winner is. So is it, David, is it that Mr. Alexander is now setting up roadblocks that is to follow after this recount is over?
No, I don't think so. I think there are 2 recounts. I think there is a recount that is allowed under the rules of GECOM, and that is grounded in the statute. And my understanding is that the request for that recount was rejected. Now, this recount that we're talking about, and I'm following Derrick's reasoning here, this recount that we have now is more a political recount. It's a recount that is meant to satisfy those who have casted doubts on the process as it is thus far. And that's why it's unfortunate that the appeal court did not send back that matter to Justice Holder, because I think that substantive question of whether, in fact, this recount that we're talking about here tonight is a legal recount, and the court has not pronounced on that yet. And I think what Vincent is trying to draw attention is this recount is a political recount and not necessarily one that is within the statute that governs recount in GECOM. But I rely on Timothy, who's the legal expert here. I'm just coming at it from a political standpoint. I think that if this recount goes forward and a winner is declared, I don't see how an election petition that is going to be filed invariably after this. I don't see how any court is not going to say that this recount, this second recount here, or well, not second, but this recount that we're talking about, or any court is not going to say that it's unconstitutional. I think it's unconstitutional, and that is why I would have loved to hear Franket hold on it and to hear what the court really has to say. But I think if it goes to petition, it's going to the court is going to rule that it's unconstitutional. Well, I'd like to have him on here.
I mean, but having said that, Dr. Hinds, the thing is, all this fiasco started with Region 4, with Mingo. All the shenanigans that Mingo did, and Christopher Ram wrote a beautiful letter today, and I know in your article, I'll raise Christopher Ram a little. Christopher Ram is saying that Mingo did not act on his own. It had to be, he got instruction from someone else, whether it's the 3 GECOM commissioners that belong to the coalition, is it the CEO, is it Congress Place? We don't know. But the thing is, I don't think Mingo acted alone to derail an entire election when all the regions, region 1 to 9, except 4, was completed to the satisfaction of everyone. Region 4, you had 421 boxes already verified to everyone's satisfaction, and then Mingo started this game. So everything is now, Mingo has been the principal player in what's going on now.
I hear that, and you would have noticed I've stayed far away from that. There is a time and place for everything, and I will have a lot to say about that at the time that I choose to. But I'm not going there now, because I think to go there is really to make the thing much more confusing than it is. I am just dealing strictly what's before us. I think this count is unconstitutional. I think it serves a political purpose, and the political purpose is to say, look, there are doubts about these elections. If there are doubts, let's recount and get rid of the doubts. That's, I think, is the intention behind it. But I think it satisfies a political function, but I think it flies in the face of what is constitutionally. That's my layman reading.
Timothy, do you think that this will be unconstitutional if GECOM agreed to do a recount of all the regions?
Absolutely not. GECOM has full power and is specifically given full power to make decisions as to the conduct of the election. And I'll go further. We all know Mingo rigged the elections. So let's start with that. GECOM as a statutory body has an obligation, if it is aware that some malfeasance took place, or if it even suspects that some malfeasance took place, not to blinker itself and blindly follow figures where Sugrim got 50, Arjune got 100, but Mingo declares that Sugrim got 100. GECOM is obligated as a statutory body not to blind itself to that, but to make sure the thing happens in a way that is fair, impartial, and transparent. So when Mingo comes with his false declaration, it is GECOM's obligation to fix it. And when it fixes it, it is acting squarely within the four corners of the Constitution. There's nothing unconstitutional about directing a recount. That is why Article 162 specifically says that you could direct and you instruct and you have conduct as an autonomous body to make sure the thing is fair and impartial. So we are at all times within the four corners of the Constitution. GECOM can say do it again. GECOM can say do it a third time until GECOM is satisfied. And at the end of the day, the question is, did GECOM act fairly and impartially within the four corners of the Constitution? You cannot blindly take a miscount and follow through with it as if you have no discretion, because then you are abdicating your discretion. GECOM has a discretion, and its discretion is exercised for the purpose of fairness, impartiality, and transparency. So when it sees that one of its own has defied that and contravened that and torn it all up and thrown it out the window, GECOM has an obligation to fix it. So they are specifically acting within their mandates under the Constitution when they fix it. And the recount is not just constitutional. The recount is the only way that GECOM can fulfill its constitutional mandate, and the result of the recount, notwithstanding what Vincent Alexander says, is the binding result. Now, Vincent Alexander is trying his best to obfuscate, to muddy the water, so that we have this kind of discussion that detracts from the reality that Mingo rigged the election.
And that's a good point you're raising there, too. Nigel Singh is saying that as GECOM, as we all agree, GECOM was supposed to be a fair arbiter of the election without taking sides. But what they have proven after the election was that they are not that fair in terms of ruling exactly what transpired in the election. My question now to you, GECOM has agreed to go ahead with the count, all three of you gentlemen. Should GECOM, because the staff seems to be tainted, and I'm sure they have good people at GECOM, I don't discount that, but should GECOM now go to the maybe the Auditor General office and get those staff to come and do the count for them? Or even hire private auditing firm in Guyana and bring them in and say, you know what, I will make an appointment to you within GECOM to do the count with us. Will that be illegal? Maybe Tim, you can start with us.
GECOM has the power to hire and fire. So GECOM can hire people and instruct people to do the machinery of a count. GECOM always has that power. This is not something that it can delegate or abdicate. GECOM can hire Mingo and it can fire Mingo. It can hire a deputy returning officer, it can hire a deputy returning officer. So it has full power to do that. In fact, I would say that if GECOM reasonably suspects, as they must reasonably suspect, that Mingo has abdicated his responsibility, they would be acting wrongly if they blindly said to Mingo, go do it again for a third time. They would be acting correctly within their constitutional mandate by saying, you can't do it no more. I'm hiring somebody else and I'm instructing them to do it.
Do you see that way, David?
No, I mean, Tim is right. I mean, GECOM can go hire somebody and all of that. Theoretically, he's right. But GECOM It's a statutory body, but it's a political body. Has 3 people from one political organization representing the interests of one political organization, and it has 3 representing the interests of another political organization. And of course, you have the chairperson with the casting vote. And so, what decisions they take, they now call it modalities. And we already start to have a quarrel over modalities. And this was the premise of my conclusion of my column yesterday, is this thing that we are calling a recount will not solve the problem of the election. It will not solve any problem. You're going to quarrel over modalities. You're going to say Mingo should not preside over the recount. The people at GECOMs are tainted. We're going to have a big quarrel over that. And then we get to the recount. And all hell is going to break loose over the recount. Each side is going to try to steer the recount in a way at the end of the day, I think that recount is going to put us in more trouble than we are now. And that is why I took the position yesterday in my column that, look, I mean, if we want...
David, we will get into your column, if you don't mind, after. Let's go for a commercial break. And when we come back, we will go into Dr. Hinds' column yesterday. And viewers out there, please send us your questions. I know there's a lot of questions you want to ask David, and we'll be privileged and honored to ask him those questions. So now we'll take a commercial break.
You are now able to manner with a cloud computer. Best of all, no waiting for a technician to show up to fix all of your computer crashes or viruses, or any computer problem. No more worrying about power surge or losing your files. Let Globespan set up a cloud computer for you to work from home or anywhere. Access with a laptop, iPad, or any device that you may have. You can set up your own passwords and keep all your information hidden. Globespan will set up all the antivirus programs, automatic backups, and configure a computer to fit your needs. Globespan has technicians in the US and Guyana to assist you. Call Globespan today. In Georgetown, call 225-9054. In West Coast, call 269-0141. Or in the United States, call 718-551-3290. Did you know the FBI warned against using public Wi-Fi? And hackers using public Wi-Fi can download viruses and steal all of your private information. Let Globespan help you protect against hackers by providing you with a virtual private network or VPN. Keep all of your data hidden and protected, including sensitive information, documents, bank account numbers, and more. The FBI recommends using a VPN, and Globespan can help provide one for you. It's very simple and easy to use. Call Globespan today. In Georgetown, call 225-9054. In West Coast, call 269-0141. Or in the United States, call 718-551-3290.
Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us as we continue the second part of our program tonight. And we want to, tonight, on this part of our program, to zoom in on the article that Dr. Hinds wrote yesterday in the Kaichur News, which I said was brought a lot of discussion. And I think people, a lot of our viewers out there and those on social media see this article in the context of a racist statement. I read it many times and I didn't see that context. But again, it's a person's opinion, and everyone look at it through the eyes of their own understanding. But David, and I want you, Derrick and Tim, to chime in any time. We know in your article you talk about your growing up days in an Afrocentric society, and the Black movement started, and you're part of that, and you're being a Black nationalist. That is not a crime. I think that's noble. I think there are Indian nationalists, there was white nationalists, there is every nationalist in the world. So being a Black nationalist should be an honor, not to degrade you. But you said the black movement changed into people's movement. And what strikes me is that being part of the WPA and being Afrocentric, you fought against the dictatorship of Barnum. And that's important to understand within the context of, even though you're Afrocentric, you're a black nationalist, you fought against a black government in Forbes Barnum. I don't think the Guyanese quite understand that, and I think people look within context of how things are written. And having said that, what you said afterwards is that the African community saw that you get rid of an African dictator to replace it with an Indian dictator, so to speak. And that is where the problem lies. And I believe that honestly, under Desmond Hoyt and Cherry Jagan, I think we had a breathing space there. I think these two gentlemen did very good for Guyana. I think with the advent of Bara Jagdeo into the presidency, I think that created some friction because people see him as arrogant and as, despicable and all the things that you don't want in a leader. I think, in my own view, that Jagdeo has changed. I might be wrong, but I think he has changed, having gone into opposition. I think when they were in government, he think that he can do what he want, when he want, where he want to do it, because the Indian population, his solid base was there to re-elect them all the time. That changed in 2015. But having said that, Dr. Hinds, what strikes me is that you're calling for an interim government. And you're saying that we should destroy the ballot boxes. I think that's a criminal statement, if I can use that term, because that is destroying public property. Those ballots, whether we like it or not, I don't think you literally mean destroy it. I hope you don't mean that. But the thing is, when you said destroy it, people take it literally. And don't forget, some of your supporters, because people look up to you as one of the leaders, they will say, Dr. Hinds said it, let's go and do it. That is possible. In addition to that, you're calling for an interim government of 2 years, but then in that government, you want David Granger to be the head. And my question to you, why not Irfan Ali? Based on the election results as we know it, that has been publicly accepted by most of the community, most Guyanese, because the PP would have won about 51, 52%. Why not Irfan Ali be the president and Granger be the prime minister? Or why not give us an Amerindian as the president? Anyone? Why not make the Chief Justice the president for an interim period? Why do you have to put Granger as the leader of an interim government? I know it's a lot here, but...
Yeah, I know there's a lot. There are two things I want to start with. What results? The elections are not over. What results? The elections are not over. If there is any result, it is the result that Mingo gave us.
Dr. Hinds, that's not true.
No.
That's not true.
Let me finish. I'm saying that there is no result. That's my view. My view is that there is no result. No result has been declared by GECOM. So I don't understand where there is a result. Some people feel that the PPP won the election. Some people feel the coalition won the election. That's
Dr.
why.
Dr. Hinds, sorry I'm cutting you in. I'm sorry I'm cutting you. But the statement of polls that the PPP has that from GECOM show that they won the election.
Charles, I am saying that GECOM has not declared a winner. GECOM has not declared a winner. We just had a long discussion about who has the discretion and who has the statutory power, who has the constitutional power. GECOM has not declared a winner. What we have is a disputed election. In fact, what I'm saying, if you want to force GECOM to say that they have a winner, you'll have to go to what Mingo's thrown up. All right? And I'm even saying I'm prepared to forget about that. Right?
But the Chief Justice said, Dr. Hinds, that Mingo's computation is fraudulent.
All right. But Stan, I am saying there is no winner, and I'm prepared to discard what Mingo has thrown up, and I'm prepared to discard and others say is the true thing. GECOM has not declared a winner, and it's on that basis that I'm saying, look, this thing is not going to end well. To quote the Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, it's not going to end nice. To pretend that it will end nice is to be criminal. All right? That's my view. My view is that if one is concerned about political stability, if one is concerned about keeping Guyana together, one has to look at what are the choices you have. You can go with the choice of counting what's in the boxes, declare the PPP the winner, and deal with what comes after that. Or declare the coalition the winner and deal with what comes after that. You can go that route. Or you can go the route that I'm suggesting and to say this thing that is likely to lead to something that is not nice. Stop it in its tracks now. And deal with the problems that got us to this point. We have gotten to this point not starting with this election. It's been there a long time. This is really the occasion for the big problem. This is not the problem. This here is a symptom of the larger problem. Give the society a break. All right? Set up an interim government. Give the society a break. Deal with some of the structural problems that are there while the society has time to breathe and to mend. And then we come back to elections. Now, I am not opposed to elections, but if you see an election that is going to lead to the dismantling of your society, I think you have a responsibility to say, no, I am going to choose keeping the society together rather than choose a quote-unquote democracy that will dislocate the society. Democracy there's no magic in democracy. South Africa was a democracy, but it was a democracy for whites only. America was a democracy during segregation and slavery, but it was a democracy for whites only. There is no magic in democracy. It has been argued that under Burnham, Indians claimed that there was a democracy for blacks. Under Jack Dior, blacks claimed it was a democracy for Indians. There's no magic in democracy. And so therefore, I am choosing keeping Guyana together rather than a democracy that really is in people's heads. So it's not a rejection of elections. It's not a rejection of real democracy, but it's a rejection of a course of action that I think is not going to end nice. We have had our experiences of doom in Guyana, going back to the 60s, coming forward. And every time we've escaped and stayed together. When are we going to learn that at some point we may end up like Bosnia? We may end up like one of those societies, and I don't want to go there. Now, one can split hairs about why I said Granger, the president of an interim government. That is just custom. Whenever people set up interim governments, they've always used the incumbent as the head of the interim government. It's just custom, it's just normal. But they can put who they want to head the interim government. It don't matter to me, all right? In Kenya, when there was an interim government, it was headed by the incumbent. In Zimbabwe, when Zimbabwe had gotten to the point where we were, and Mugabe agreed to an interim government, Mugabe headed the government, even though the opposition claimed that he had rigged the election. So the fact that I say Granger should be the head of the interim government, it's just universal custom. All right? So I'll stop there for now.
Timothy, you want to chime in there?
Nobody's going to buy that universal custom argument. So let me start with the negative first. David, you'll forgive me. But let me then go to the main thrust of what David is saying. We're at the edge of a cliff. We are at the edge of a cliff. We are in the middle of a perfect storm. APNU have lost the election. Every time we have an election, as David correctly points out, we have the threat of violence. I saw you sought to exonerate Desmond Hoyt and Chedi Jaga, and I disagree with you. In 92, we had violence. In 97, we had violence. Every single time we have an election, we have problems. And it does not matter which deity you put at the head, which person you seek to elevate and put on a pedestal and say that this is the perfect leader. We all know that at every election cycle there is a problem, and the reason that there's a problem is that it is winner take all, and that the side which has lost and their 50% support base feel excluded and don't like it. So let's be frank about that, and let's talk the truth about that. David is absolutely right. The reason we're in a perfect storm now is that our economy has crashed. And because of the illegality of the government trying to benefit from rigged elections, we are facing sanctions, so the economy is going to crash worse. And because of COVID, people are being sent home, so that people who live day to day to earn a living and do not have even 1 week's margin of fat are going to be starving in a couple of weeks. And because of worse, ridiculous decisions by the government closing down the market, so that a farmer whose tomatoes are ripe on Monday is told he got to wait till Friday to bring it to the market, we're going to have serious problems in terms of inflation, in terms of access to food, especially here in Region 4, which is the center point, the tender box. Region 4 is the problem. So we have bad decisions, we have a crashing economy, and then we have heightened ethnic tension. We have a perfect storm going, and this may be the catastrophe. I agree with David. The solution is not for us sitting here who have no power to decide on an interim government. It will never happen. We should cut that conversation short now. Because for there to be an interim government, the two leaders don't just have to decide in principle on it, but they then have to decide on the modalities. It will never happen. Both sides feel aggrieved. David is right. Our democracy is not fair, because as long as Indo-Guyanese hold a larger demographic group, they have odds in the race. We run in a 100-meter race and they're starting 20 meters in advance. It's not a real democracy. We had light at the end of the tunnel in 2015 because for the first time, the independent voters, people like me, managed to get rid of a PPP government in a fair election. First time it ever happened in Guyana. So that demographic advantage they had was removed by the liberal Indo voter, the neutral voter, and the people who had had enough of PPP corruption. And that progress has been totally destroyed and devastated by the rig that the current government is attempting now. Because any little bit of hope, any little bit of trust, any little bit of getting over that threshold of ethnic voting has now been, it is so sad. That is the real tragedy. Because in 5 years, PNC, APNU can never win an election because of what was done now. Their only hope is to perpetuate this rig, stay in power so that in 5 years they can do it again. Because they cannot win another fair election because of what they're doing now. And that is the tragedy. So how do we solve the problem and bring ourselves back from the precipice that David is describing? And I agree with David, recognizing that our democracy is not fair and that the APNU nonsense that they're getting on with has put them right back to where they were in 1985 and 1992. How do we solve that problem? The only way to solve the problem is for the powers that be to say to their people, we will honor this fair result and we will walk away, and you must not do anything about it. And when the PPP wins, as we all know they have won, cater, quarrel, negotiate for shared governance, which is what I've been talking about for the past 15 months. So David now talking about burning ballot box. I'm sorry, I'm not going to use that expression because I know you didn't mean it seriously. David is talking about an interim government. It's unfortunate he wasn't talking about it a year ago. And let me tell you, the whole APNU tactic in this election was to sit down and wait because they thought they could have won fairly. So for 9 regions they counted. And it is when they reached the last region, Region 4, and they saw the mountain they had to climb, they realized they couldn't win fairly, and that is why Region 4 is the tinderbox, is the problem. Because it is when they realized they couldn't do it fairly, they had to go to Mingo. They should have been talking about inclusive governance since 2015. That is the platform they campaigned on. That's how they got my vote. Because I can tell you, when AFC, whom I had been supporting, said they would go with APNU, I confronted Nigel Hughes, who was the chairman, and I said, man, you should have made offers to APNU and to PPP. You should have said to the PPP, if you stop your corruption and take these steps, we will join with you. And say to APNU, if you acknowledge past rigging and take these steps and apologize to the people, we will join with you. I had that conversation with Nigel Hughes before the 2015 elections. But nevertheless, they chose one side and we had to get rid of PPP corruption. But let me ask you, if you take away my vote and I am powerless, what is worse? Financial corruption or electoral fraud, where I don't even have a say to say that I'm vexed with you and I'm voting against you next go round? We are at the edge of the precipice, but David has waited too long and has stayed silent too long to come now and talk about interim. Now we got to do the right thing and acknowledge who won, stand up and look at them in the face and say, y'all that I never voted for and can never support, y'all won. Take it. But we got to talk now. That's the only way for a solution. Us sitting here can't talk about interim government. Who are we?
Before you come on, Derrick, Dr. Hinds, I know in your article, you did mention that some of the guys in Congress Place went overboard with this government, the current administration, and they made some big mistakes and they were led into it, in your words, by the actions of the PPP. As Timothy mentioned, why wasn't you in 2015 be a champion of a shared governance? Or if you did, what was the result with your recommendation?
When the history of shared governance is examined in Guyana, Timothy Jonas will be the latecomer, not David Hinds. David Hinds belonged to a party that put before the Guyanese people in 1979 a document which was contributed largely by the late Dr. Walter Rodney of a government of national unity and reconstruction. And from then to now, our sharing has been a central plank of the Working People's Alliance. We can even go further back. In 1961, it was a UC Quina then Sidney King, one of the founders of the WPA, which first introduced that concept in Guyana. Shared governance got into the platform of the coalition in 2015. Well, let's go back to 2000. It got into the manifesto of the APNU because the WPA insisted. It got into the 2015 manifesto because the WPA insisted. Right, every week. So people can't lie on me. Go back to what I have written between 2015 and would see that I constantly said the solution to Guyana's problem is shared governance. But I don't use shared governance. I use power sharing. Go back. So this thing that David is too late, Timothy is late. And I'm glad Timothy and Anog have come on board. In fact, Henry Jeffrey, one of the leaders of Anog, was very honest. He said, I was not always. I came back. I was one of the people who asked people like Hinds, how this thing would work. Right? And he's now come on board. Now, I don't say that to cast aspersions, but Timothy is saying that I was very early on this matter. And very, very clear. In 2011, when we reached that impasse, Mr. Quayana asked Mr. Donald Ramutar, look, you have won a minority government. Why don't you form a government of national unity, seeing that you now have a minority government? The PPP rejected it. in 2015, as Mr. Quine said recently, it would have been impertinent on his part to then ask the next side, who now win, to tell them, you form a government of national unity, right? But that does not take away from the fact that we have always believed that government of national unity is the answer. WPA is associated with that. David Hinds' name is associated with power sharing in the 1990s, and elements in the WP and elements in the PNC, people like Vincent Alexander and Emily Case and so forth, pushed Desmond Hoyt to declare in 2002 power sharing is an idea whose time has come. When the PNC moved to the PPP several times for a power sharing government, they rejected it. So the rejection of power sharing has always been the PPP from 1990 to the present, right? So no, don't tell me I am late with power sharing. I'm very early with power sharing, and it's been consistent with the question of power sharing. I think, no, I disagree with you, Timothy. I think people like ourselves have a responsibility. I think there are people who read what I write and expect persons like myself, as Dr. Walter Rodney said. He said, look, if you are a poor person, as I was born into a poor community, and your community helped you to get to the point where you have a voice, you have to use that voice for them. And so, yes, who are we? We are very important. I think voices like ours are very important. We're not part of the political establishment. But if you look at the history of politics, not only in Guyana, but in the world, it is not, change never come about by the political leaders. Change come about when persons like ourselves, who they now call civil society and all kinds of names, when persons like ourselves are bold enough to stand up and say, wrong course, here is where we should go. You know, if we do not put solutions on the table, the politicians are not going to put it. So to sit down and say, let's have some count that will show the PPP win, and then we talk about power or sharing. Suppose that recount show that the coalition wins. Then all of us will say, they tamper with the box, and they do this and they do that. There is no end, no nice end to this. I don't understand why we insist on this counting. There is no nice end to it. Some of us, some of you apparently are certain that the PPP win. You all live in those boxes. You have been in there and you all see the result. But I live in the boxes. I don't know. I don't know that the PPP win. Note, I've never said the PPP won. I've never said the coalition won, although I supported the coalition at the election. But I never said the coalition won, never, ever. In a dispute, once you put your neck on there and you say that one side won, you have removed yourself from being part of the solution, right? And I do not want to remove myself from being part of the solution, because I think that voices like ours are the ones that will have to push for a solution, not the politicians. And
Dr. Hein, you have said a lot there, but this is I want to mention this in passing, is that any party that will be true to itself, if you know you win the election, you will not be putting one stumbling block after another to get a real recount. The thing is, if you know you win, show us your statement of polls that GECOM gave you. The PPP has shown theirs. The international community has theirs. The other small parties have theirs. Where is the statement of poll from the PNC? If they know they win. But before you answer that, before
GECOM and Mingo show the statement of polls.
Well, it's just
you're going on and say GECOM and Mingo show
no. Dr. Hinds, they did not show the statement of poll. They show a spreadsheet that was bogus.
If I may, making statements of fact without presenting anything in support. Mr. Jonas also did the same thing. He said, everybody knows Mingo rigged.
Except up to AFC.
As if, sir, as if he saw Mingo rigging.
Yes, I did.
And
Let me interrupt you right away and say, yes, I did.
the point that
You were not there, but I
no,
was. So let me interrupt you and say, yes, I did.
this brings us to the point of really how this started. Mingo, as I understand, was counting and his duties were interrupted and he could not carry
Derrick,
out.
that's baloney. Derrick, that's baloney. Where is evidence of that interruption? I'm hearing that. I'm hearing that statement, but where's the evidence of it?
I thought that we were having a discussion in which.
Well, you got to speak the truth, Derrick. Come on, you know that's not true.
All right, if you want to call it my opinion, fine. But would you permit me to talk?
Go ahead, yeah.
The point I want to get at is that we had a legal process to determine whether fraud was committed or whether this thing was done properly. The court intervened and said, look, let Mingo go back and count. Even after Mingo counted and came up with a declaration, there was an objection to it. He did it the second time, there was an objection to it. All of that could have been solved, in my view, in other people's viewpoint, by an elections petition. Instead, you have Mr. Jonas and others saying that they have proved that Mingo rigged. There is nothing in our election laws nor in our political practices that require AP and UAFC to show their SOPs as against the PPPs. GECOM is responsible for collecting SOPs, and GECOM is the one that looks and evaluates SOPs. So for you to say that it's the PPP's SOPs that are correct is wrong. And Mr. Jonas is severely hampered by the fact that his party is a small party. Nonetheless, he should be praised for going out in the political world and trying to have his viewpoint heard. But his party lacked the capacity to collect SOPs from all those regions. Only the PPP and APNU, AFC did. So he's speaking from second-hand information. But be that as it may, there was a procedure for this, and we might question the wisdom of our framers when they said that this should be done by elections commission petition, and instead we jumped ahead and sought to resolve this by several applications to the court, and one application resulting in accounting that would turn out to be insufficient. And as Mr. Jagdeo said, all counts are fraudulent, and therefore he's foreshadowing his position that whatever count comes out from this will be rejected. And as David correctly pointed out, the recount will not be accepted and probably will engender more problems. So all I'm saying is that we swayed from our legal system and we got into this mess. Now, I must say that we need to talk. I'm not going to determine history. I know David has always been on the side of power sharing. That I give it to him. He's always been supporting and spouting the necessity of power sharing as a solution to the ethnic problems in Guyana. But while I admire him for that, I don't think this is a time for power sharing because emotions are too raw, tempers are too flayed, and political well-being, political good faith is all gone. We really need a of reconciliation, I don't know if an interim government will do it because I'm not sure it will work. But we really need to sit down and, more particularly, tone down the rhetoric. We need to take the venom, the poison, the degradation out of statements, particularly leaders. And I don't want to point fingers. People in the political sphere know fully well what they're saying to counter what the APN UFC government has supposedly done. We, as responsible people, need to look at Guyana and its future and decide that if we're going to have a republic that remains whole, stable, and strong, then we must do the right thing. And one of those right things is to start respecting each other, start appreciating our opinions, and last but not least, recognizing that we can't get rid of each other. We can't kill each other, and we don't want to do that. And therefore, we have to find a way of living together. So let's talk. Let's talk and talk constructively and determinedly to a solution to our country's problems.
Timothy,
I'd
there's a
like to
lot
answer
there.
that, Charles.
Yeah,
I would
yeah, go on.
definitely like to answer that.
Yes.
First of all, in response to David, I know David has been advocating shared governance, but it's a symptom of that kind of advocacy that it happens when you're in the opposition. So when WPA was in the opposition, faced with rigged elections, they couldn't win. Shared governance. When Jagan was in the opposition and couldn't win because of rigged elections, he wanted shared governance. Eventually, Hoyt, who I feel is our best president that we've had in terms of his financial management of the country, when he was in opposition, having always rejected shared governance, finally, in early 2000s, he said shared governance. So when the cycle happened again and the shoe was on the other foot, and WPA found itself as part of a government, they went very quiet about shared governance. And if they were serious about shared governance, in 2015, after they went on that platform and talked about shared governance, by 2016, 2017, they should have been advocating loudly and saying, we're going to walk away unless you take steps, because nothing is being done. Nothing has been done. But when you're in power, you forget about shared governance. You're enjoying the sweet. So that they've had successive ministers, WPA appointees. None of them talk about shared governance. They've been silent. But now we're at the edge and we hear it again. So I'm not taking away from David's history of advocating for shared governance. But in terms of WPA over the last 5 years, it has been a bit convenient. Now, in response to what Mr. Arjune is saying, he said a number of things, and they really worry me. You see, half of Guyana is going to believe anything that is put to them in order to give their side victory. And the other half of Guyana will believe anything that is put to them to give themselves victory. And that is why it is really important for the leaders, the spokesmen, the people that speak in this kind of forum, that people are listening to tell the truth. Now, the first thing that Mr. Arjune said is that a new and united Guyana doesn't have the resources, didn't have the resources, and is taking second-hand information from the PPP. That is false. A new and united Guyana did not participate in any assessment of statements of poll in any other region except Region 4. But in respect of Region 4, we went around and we took photographs of the statements of poll which were posted outside each place of poll. And we collected over 100. So that when Mr. Mingo was doing his count, we were able, where his count coincided with a statement of poll that we had, we were able to assess the statement of poll we had and compare it with his count. So when Mr. Mingo said APNU 113 votes, and we are seeing APNU 13 votes, we could form a very clear conclusion. Now, when Mr. Mingo did his first count without even looking at statements of poll and talking about a spreadsheet, Mr. Arjune conveniently says, oh, he was told to do it again and there was a hullabaloo. But he was told it was unlawful and was directed to do it again. The second time when he did it, again, he acted without transparency, which the Chief Justice says was mandatory, and he again misrepresented the numbers which were on the statements of poll. So this isn't second-hand information. I'm not sitting comfortably in New York. I'm sitting uncomfortably here in this banana republic, aware that we're at the edge of the precipice, and I am saying that Mr. Arjune, sitting where he's sitting, cannot tell me about the resources I had and the material I had and what I saw with my own eyes. He can't tell me about that. Now, the next thing, no, I heard him out and I expect him to hear me out. Yeah. The next thing is that the British High Commissioner, the American Ambassador, the European Union representatives, the Canadian High Commissioner, the Organization of American States, all of them, and Commonwealth, all of them walked out in protest, sat through it, said, what are you doing? How can you be doing this? They all walked out in protest twice. The first time he did his rig and the second time he did his rig. That's being ignored. The next thing is that CARICOM came down with the agreement of everyone to supervise a count and was unable to perform because they were obstructed by APNU. That is the other thing. And then the final thing is the point that you raised, which is that if this thing is done by statements of poll, and if in 2011, David Granger said, man, we need to see your statements of poll, and GECOM accommodated him and published them for everybody to see, so that the fight died down because there was nothing left to fight about. Why is it that in 2020, the same Granger can't agree and the same GECOM can't do what they did in 2011 to post up the statements of poll? We're all human beings, we all have common sense. And if two sides are saying two different things and one side says, here's all my cards, face up on the table, look at them, examine them and tell me. And the other side says, I hold in my cards, you can't see any. There's only one possible conclusion to draw. So I'm giving you evidence of my statements of poll taken by photographs on the places of poll. I'm giving you evidence of the entire international community. I'm giving you evidence of what my eyes saw, and then I'm giving you common sense evidence of one side saying, here are my cards, and the other side hiding. And finally, what I want to say to you is that when the Guyanese voter hears that kind of intellectual dishonesty, obfuscating what are clear and obvious facts, he grasps it and tensions rise. And it is exactly that kind of thing that is going to cause an escalation and cause conflict. So that when someone is intellectually dishonest in this forum, so that he causes hopes to rise and he gives somebody something to grab onto, when people start hurting in the road, that person is to blame. We have to learn to be honest. Honesty does not have color, it does not have religion, it does not have anything else than the truth and falsehood.
Well, Mr. Jonas,
gentlemen, Derrick, hold a thought. We'll go for a break and come back, and then when we come back, we will continue discussion and wrap up after that. So just hold your thought there, Derrick, as we go to break.
Looking for an embroidery service or advertising services? Look no further than Inspire Incorporated. Get your very own personalized items that include rubber stamps, ID cards, mouse pads, diaries, polos, office wear, and so much more. Create your own logo or messages on any subtract. It's very quick and efficient. Call Inspire Incorporated today at 222-2042 or visit at 62 Area Q, Turkine, Guyana. Attention fellow Guyanese, no need to go into person anymore to book your flight. Book your flight over the phone with a Globespan GT agent. Once you finish booking over the phone, our agent will give you a payment center close to your home. That's right, no hassle for travel anymore. Globespan is making it convenient and easier for you to book your flights. No need to travel to the office. Call Globespan GT today for low fares. Call 227-1701. That's 227-1701. Or in Berbice, call Rose Hall at 337-4287. Globespan making it easier. So call 227-1701. That's 227-1701. Or Rose Hall at 337-4287.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for staying with us tonight. We're going to wrap up shortly. But Derrick, before you come to respond, I have with me here a statement from Jerome Khan, who was a former PNC parliamentarian. And he said, and I quote, he said, the group that Kaiser News columnist Freddie Kisun described as the Barnumite faction is real. They exist, and they've taken over control of the PNC, are aided and abetted by a corrupt protege of the founder leader. He said, Khan said the small but influential gang within the PNCR was thwarted in their effort to seize control of the party, firstly by the late President Hugh Desmond Hoyt, and then by Robert Corbyn. It seems to me that David Granger, and that's why I come back to you, Dr. Hinds, David Granger seems to be a very weak leader. He allowed the cabal in the PNC to take over. And my question to you is this, come from what Tim just talked about. When in 2015, you became part of the government, did you give APNU AFC an ultimatum, if you don't do shared governance, we will walk? Did the AFC also did that? Because they were saying the same thing, but never did. Or the question should be, was the APNU AFC a shared governance scenario?
No, you're right. The WPA didn't give the government an ultimatum that you go to share governance or you walk. There was not any need to do that. Shared governance was one of the planks on which the coalition walked. And we've said privately and publicly that we regret that the government did not embrace shared governance. The process was started by Nigel Hughes heading a committee. I appeared before that committee. Several others like Ravi Dev and others appeared before the committee. Nigel Hughes presented his report. So the government started the process. Where they would be faulted is that they did not push through with the process. And as a party that was part of the government, one has to take full responsibility, even though one did not agree with what happened. So yes, I'm willing to say that. But I want to go back, Charles, to this thing about Reagan, and I hear Timothy that he was there. I happen to have been there on election day. And I saw some things on election day that resembled Reagan. I saw some things on election day that resembled Reagan. I've stayed away from this discourse about Reagan. Perhaps I'm the only person on the panel here who was live and put down his life against Reagan under the PNC. And from that standpoint, Reagan is not a one-day thing. Reagan is not a one-man thing. Reagan starts with the voters list. We went into this election with a rigged voters list, which was exploited on election day. And there are different stop signs along the way. I have a problem with somebody saying, at this stop sign, I saw some rigging, and so the elections were rigged, and ignoring other stop signs. One of the reasons I've stayed away is that a rigged election is not Mr. Mingo or some day that you have 113 on one SOP and 30 on another SOP. I happen to know that there are statements of polls which I saw, and I was there, where there are 50 people, let's say 50 people, who were supposed to vote at a voting polling place, and the PPP got 120 votes, and I'm not quoting here.
But Doc, where did you see that? Where did you see that?
Let me finish.
Okay.
Timothy saw what he saw. I saw what I saw. Other people saw what they saw along the line of Reagan. And so therefore, to pinpoint what people think is one instance of Reagan and conclude that the PPP win the election from that, I think that's dishonest. Henry Jeffrey, who's a leader of Timothy's party, I think put the hammer on the nail in his most recent column. Two teeth can't laugh. When people are going around and talking about a rigged election with one thief, all right, you are inciting, and to use Mr. Jonas' thing, you're inciting problem. The people kind of know better. The people of Guyana know better. And I go back to where I stand today. Given what I know, forget about those ballot boxes. I throw out one scenario. If you recount, and the recount shows that the coalition wins, what will you all do?
But that's Doc, let me stop you there. I know Derrick want to come in there. The thing is this: what you said there about a polling station where there's 50 registered voter and the PP won 100 and something. Where was the PNC polling agent? That doesn't seem sensible to me.
I asked the PNC the same question.
Yeah, and what happened?
And why you are asking, Charles, and others are asking, well, if the coalition know they win, why they don't want the process to be counted?
And that's what I'm coming.
Let me finish. Why do you think the PPP does not want to count all the regions?
No, Doc. I'm not a supporter of the PPP. I'm not a supporter of the PPP. But the PPP wants to count all the ballots.
I'm saying to you that both sides got some fight. Today, Mr. Jerry Govaya, who been talking about a recount all the time. Now GECOM is saying, let's recount. Jerry saying, wait a minute. I only want a recount of Region 4. Why Jerry does not want a recount of the other region? Two teeth. May God laugh, I think is a thesis that is worth examining. And we are talking. There are no angels. There are no angels when it comes to the manipulation of elections in Guyana.
Yeah, Derrick, go ahead.
And you see, this is the idea that is often pushed, that the PNC rigs and the PPP doesn't. I was in Guyana for the election. I wasn't in the place where Mr. Jonas was, but I am aware where I was that the PPP did improper things, and it's not the first year I've been at elections.
Massive
instances. For instance, in Region 3, the PPP got votes in a polling station that are more than the registered voters, and that is not unusual. So when you state, Charles, and others, that the PNC rigged and the PPP hasn't, you need to look at the facts. Further, when I speak that Mingo was stopped and he made a declaration based on what he was doing, I'm not being intellectually dishonest. I'm basing it on facts that I have gathered from speaking to credible sources, and I'm also basing it on the history of our elections in Guyana. Now, David said an important thing at almost at every election, and Mr. Jonas echoed it. There's a problem. And there's a problem because both sides accuse the other of stealing. This is not the first time. This is the first time that we've had the kind of disruptions that led to not being completed, and now you have a fiasco. The country leaning over this precipice. Again, I say, if he had allowed the legal process to play out properly, we might avoid it where we are. And going to this recount is no guarantee that it will solve the problem. I think Vincent Alexander is pointing to problems that may occur, and we need to pay attention. So let's be frank. When we talk about dishonesty and honesty and sending the wrong messages, let's be frank. There might be improprieties on both sides. I don't know about what the PNC did, and I will hold up that I've never seen them doing anything. But you could say the same thing about the PPP. But let's not say this one is a thief and that one is a thief, and therefore we can conclude that the PPP won because they don't steal, and the PNC lost, AP and UFC lost because it steals. Let's get the facts. And I don't think Mr. Jonas is in possession of all the facts. You are not. I don't think David is. I
That's right.
believe if we had pursued an elections petition with all of its forensic resources, we probably would have gotten to the bottom of this. Unfortunately, we haven't, and we will be left with a conclusion that, as David correctly pointed out, and I fully support, I've said it, we might have more problems at the end of this recount than when we started.
Timothy, you want to say something? I mean, wrap up now, Timothy, so you can respond to that and then we can close up.
Well, we haven't strayed outside of the Constitution yet. GECOM is doing its job in its way. They are instructing and directing and exercising their discretion. So don't let's pretend we're outside of the Constitution. Don't let's pretend that we need to be bound by Mingo's first declaration or second. GECOM has the discretion to accept them or reject them, and that's what it's doing. So we're still within the ambit of the Constitution. I don't think anyone in this forum so far has praised the PPP for any kind of integrity. I certainly haven't, and I don't think you have either, Charles. And I don't think anyone here has suggested that the PPP is not above electoral fraud. I don't think anyone's pretended otherwise. In fact, I don't think there are any PPP supporters in this forum. So again, don't let's jump to speculation. But at the end of the day, I am adamant that your vote must count, and what I saw took away my vote, and therefore there needs to be a recount. And I believe that GECOM has decided a recount of all 10 regions. I am perfectly happy with that. Let it happen. If the coalition have won, the coalition must win. But here I will say, if PPP have won, PPP must win. And that flip side, I have not heard the other two gentlemen here say.
Thank you, Timothy. Dr. Hinds?
Elections in Guyana, in the final analysis, have no winner. The country loses. And this has been going on over and over and over. We've refused to fix the electoral apparatus. We've refused to fix the government architecture to ensure that we can have elections that all sides can have confidence in. We've kicked the ball down the road. When we get out of jail, we said, oh, that's good, nice democracy. 1997, we almost fell over the place. And the so-called three wise men came in and we did a thing and we had a accord and so on and so forth, and we were spared. 2001, we were spared. 2015, 11 and 2015, independent voters, and Timothy, I count myself in that category too.
Yes, my friend, I know.
Save the day by pulling us back from where the PPP had taken us. And every time we do that, we keep kicking the ball down the road. What we are in the presence of, I think, is the ultimate. I don't think we can kick it further. In a sense, what is happening now was bound to happen at some point. I said in one of my columns, Sidney King saw this as far back as 1961. And we didn't see it. 60 years later, we got nowhere to hide. We have nowhere to go. And we're holding on to terms such as democracy and free and fair election and so forth to find another way to get out of jail and to kick the ball down the road. I'm not for that. I've had enough. I've been in this thing since I was a little boy. As a big man now, right? I don't want to get out of jail and kick the ball down the road. I want, before I go, to see Guyana free from this thing. And so I'm prepared to get past all these SOPs and the statements of poll and recounting, and to find a path where we can settle that has been on our backs for 6 decades and more. That is my interest now. I supported one side. As far as I'm concerned, I don't want them to win at this point. Because if they win, it won't take us anywhere that is good. I don't want the other side to win. Because if they win, it won't take us to any place good. I want Guyana to win. And that was the basis of my column yesterday, which is ignore. Because when I think about what the outcome of counting those votes would be, my heart burns and hurts. We've been through it too long. Too long. So I'm saying let us find a way to cool out. And I think an interim government gives us a chance to. I tell you, tempers are high out there. Timothy's there more than me, and he knows it. What we saw on March 6th by those protesters is the tip of the iceberg. It's the tip of the iceberg. And if we want, in the name of democracy, to go down that road, go. I'm not coming. I'm not coming. You want to give Guyana a chance to live again? I'm coming with that. Interim government, let them take their time and do what they are supposed to do. And we try to build a groundswell from the ground to push them in that direction. I happen to believe that once you declare one side a winner, you would have thrown away this golden opportunity that out of the mess could come something positive. And that is what drove that column yesterday. All right? Ultimately, Guyana's ethnic problem will continue to bedevil us until we do something creative about it. Declaring a winner after recount is not anything creative. I rest my case.
Thank you, Dr. Hinds. Derrick?
And a good case it is, David. I have always admired your passion for fairness and justice. Look, we need to get out of this this quagmire we seem to be in. We need to find a way to out of it. I'm not sure a recount will do it, but if it's going to, then there have to be clear rules understood by the parties that whoever emerges the winner, we will have a government that runs the country with the full consent of everyone. I'm not sure it will happen, but I'm hopeful because I'm hopeful about my country, even though I'm supposedly sitting comfortably in New York. And with regard to, and some of us sit in other parts of the world, but our hearts remain in Guyana, even more than where we actually are. And with regard to to Timothy's point that we're powerless, I don't believe that. I believe that the effectiveness of democracy rests with the ordinary person. I think it was Justice Louis Brandeis that said maybe the most important role in the society is citizen. You have a right to talk, you have a right to agitate, you have a right to advocate. So I would urge you, encourage you, Timothy, and I know you probably do it without me, to continue pushing for what you want. Because it's by us pushing for what we want, we have a society that reflects the interests and goals of everyone. Finally, conversation is important. We need to communicate, but we need to communicate better in Guyana. There's too much poison, there's too much venom in statements in the political realm. We're not going to get anywhere if we don't learn how to act civilly and respectfully to each other, especially in the political realm. Look, if you were to take up this idea of shared governance, and David, I don't think this is the right time. As I said, the political landscape is not conducive to the conversation, but it has to remain on the agenda, and at some point we have to seriously approach it. We can't just pick it up when we're in opposition and then drop it when we're in government. We do have aspects of shared governance in our constitution, and it's reflected in the committees in parliament, it's reflected in the regional system, it's reflected in local democracy, but we need to do more. And we can do more if we talk and devise ways of making Guyana workable, keeping in mind the competing interests of the ethnic groups, the class interests, the religious groups, and regional aspirations. It can be done, and I know we will. We are at a dangerous point, but we love Guyana, and because of that love, we will succeed.
And gentlemen and our viewers out there, as usual, it's always a pleasure. But I want to say this in closing. In 1992, President Hoyt voluntarily gave up power after 28 years of the PNC rule. In 2015, despite the PPP was objecting to they wanted a recount, they voluntarily gave up power in 2015. And we're saying that in 2020, that's how democracy works. In a democracy, some win and some lose. That's it. I know Dr. Hinds is saying one will win and one will lose, or one should win and one should not lose. That's fine. But in democracy, that is what happens. One party will win, the other one will have to agree to that. And the thing is, I was reading the book of Matthew the other day. You're home now, you can't do anything, so you're picking up with your scriptures. And a lot of the supporters of APNU, the background is on the Christian side. And I read the Beatitude, and it says, blessed are the peacemakers. There's so many blessed things that Jesus talked about in the Beatitude. But he went down forward and he says that you are the salt of the earth. And you know, our wives cook, our mothers cook, our daughters cook, our children cook, we cook. If you put too much salt in a curry, you can't eat it. You put too little, you cannot eat it. You have to put the right amount. And the thing is, we are the salt of the earth. You are all the salt of the earth. You're here for a purpose. And I'm reminded in the book of Esther, when Mordecai uncle says, maybe for a time like this, you were born. And gentlemen, the three of you, maybe this is a time that you are called to be here. And to all Guyanese, I'm asking you, Guyana, as Dr. Hinds rightly said, belongs, and all the gentlemen, Timothy and Mr. Arjune, Guyana belongs to all of us, whether we are of African origin, Indian origin, Amerindian, mixed race, whatever it is. We cannot do without each other. As I've heard the school teacher says, you know, most of our teachers are of African origin, and they teach our children. They raise them up from the cradle. Most of our nurses are of African origin. Most of the people who protect us are of African origin. On the other side, most of the businessmen, as Timothy said, the farmers, they're of Indian origin. You know, everything works hand in hand. And unless we see each other as our brother's keeper, we are not enemies. We are our brother's keeper. If we call God our Father, if you call God Father and I call God Father, then the two of us have to be brothers. Why do we divide ourselves with ethnic group and with political persuasion when we are all from the same source? My appeal to my fellow Guyanese, please let us work together. To GECOM, do your work. Let us get the recount going. Let us agree with the rules, as Derrick says. Let us do it. And whoever is the winner, let that person be declared the winner, whether it's the coalition, whether it's PPP. Let us recognize that. And I am certain that politics as usual will not be the norm in Guyana. Administration will have to change. The way the country is governed must change. And I'm hoping, whether it's the coalition or it's the PPP, that our new government will go in a new direction for all Guyanese. To you, my gentlemen, Dr. Hinds, Mr. Jonas, Mr. Arjune, it's always a pleasure to have you on this program, and I look forward to seeing you again. To our viewers out there, we want to thank you so much for being a part of us, for Nohar Singh, for giving us this platform, for Devin doing such a good job to connect us here from New York and from Guyana and from Arizona and all different parts of the world. I've seen one of our viewers is from Bangladesh, so we have been viewing all over the world. I want to thank you so much for being a part of us tonight. And we hope when we meet again next week that Guyana will hopefully be on a stage to calm and peace. For we know when there's a storm, Jesus woke up and he spoke to the storm and it became calm. And I believe that we together can make Guyana a very beautiful place. Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much again for being with us tonight. And God bless you all, and God bless our country.
Good night, all.
Good night.